It's time to enhance the relationship between expertise and impact, between knowledge and application. Welcome to a journey of discovery and empowerment. Welcome to All Physicians Lead, the Forbes Books podcast that highlights the critical leadership role that all practicing physicians take on every day. Here's Dr. Leon Moores.
My guest today is Dr. Stephen Beeson. Steve is a nationally recognized physician, speaker, founder of Practicing Excellence. He founded this organization and is really focused on developing clinician leaders and improving the patient and care team experience by doing so. And I'll promise now not to do my best to sound like I'm campaigning to become president of the Stephen Beeson Admiration Society, although I admire what you've done quite a bit. Steve, it's truly great to have you here. Thanks for making the time. I know you've got a lot going on. Welcome to the All Physicians Lead podcast.
No, delighted to be here, Dan. Delighted to be here.
Very, 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 very exciting stuff. One of the things that we like to do, start out, everybody's got a story, your origin story. I know that, Marvel Comics is never going to do mine on the big screen, but we all have one. So, how'd you get into medicine? Where'd you grow up? What were the thought processes? How'd that play out for you?
Yeah, but my ambition when I was younger was to be a musician, trumpet player. And all throughout high school, I was just fully directed towards becoming a professional musician. And as I finished high school, I had an uncle who was a neurologist on the East Coast. And after finishing high school, we went to the Spaghetti Factory, which is a restaurant here in Southern California, and had dinner together. And during that dinner, he shared with me a day in the life of being a physician.
Oh, wow.
The process of building the skills and the knowledge and expertise to evaluate symptoms, to create a list of possibilities, and how you go about the process of finding the lesion and coming up with a diagnosis and issuing a treatment plan, and building longitudinal relationships and doing things that advance the wellness of patients and recovery. And that couple of hours at Spaghetti Factory totally changed my perspective and how I was seeing my life. And concurrently, I was realizing it's really hard to make a living as a musician. I had a couple of musical experiences where I was hired to be in jazz bands and big bands and pit orchestras. And the people I was playing with, who were making like $50 a night, were better than I could be in a lifetime. They were so good not making a living. I was a little bit discouraged at that moment. So
Sure.
Ever since that dinner at the Spaghetti Factory, I redirected from music to medicine. Went to undergraduate medical school and residency at University of California, San Diego, and I became board certified in family medicine, and the intention was to see patients for my life. And that pivoted again when I had an opportunity to do what I do now, which is helping clinicians, care team members become better in their work, to find joy, contentment, purpose, and impact, while doing their work in a way that really contributes to wellness and results and effectiveness of themselves, their patients, and the organizations they're part of, using human development. So it's been a kind of a wild journey, but that's my thumbnail, if you will.
Yeah, it's always fascinating how the unanticipated turns happen, right? And similarly, I thought, I'll, retire as a, program director or chairman of a neurosurgery program somewhere if I'm lucky. And then you get all these forks in the road and decide to take it and end up where we are. So, well, it's obviously great for organized medicine that you're doing what you're doing. And we'll talk a lot about that today. At some point, you said, I was going to be a clinical doctor, take care of patients, doing that, totally fulfilling, really impacting lives. That first major fork in the road for you, what do you remember about that? How'd that come about?
Yeah, and The idea of shifting from full-time clinical practice is a really important and profound decision. My identity and what I do every day and how and up to how people see me and how my
Yeah.
neighbors and friends and network and former patients see me is I'm still Steve, the family medicine physician that I'm going to send a picture of my rash to get guidance on what to do. That's still my kind of my day-to-day operation and still my identity. But I did pivot pretty significantly, and it was around 2015, 2016, where I was doing really three things in my life. One is I was maintaining my patient panel and doing the day-to-day work of taking care of a couple thousand patients. And I had a new responsibility at Sharp Healthcare where I was working to coach, train, and develop care team members to help us become our organizational ambitions of becoming amazing for patients and amazing for each other and using skill development to allow that to manifest. And I was also, through the work of applying people development to drive organizational outcomes, I began flying around the country to other organizations taking leave without pay to talk to other people about how do we make our organizations and care team members better, better in terms of more fulfilled, more purpose driven, but also driving the key, outcomes that we need in healthcare. Uh, and so I was occupying three FTEs, physician,
Because
coaching,
that's
training.
what we do. Right.
Yeah, and sort of healthcare, and then this other thing I was doing that I felt, I felt a calling towards, and I had to make a decision to say where am I going to focus my efforts because I couldn't continue to do all three well. So I ended up doubling down on on this channel of using skill development and human development to raise the capacity of people to drive outcomes in healthcare, and that was my became the beacon on the hill for me. I and so I ended up walking down that channel. I still, I still see myself in the exam room, and that's my identity. But my day-to-day work is leading a company that advances skill development to drive outcomes in healthcare.
Yeah, that's fascinating. You touched upon it, but expand if you will, and you have expanded on it quite a bit. Very well marked up copies of your books here that I've
Right.
used and recommended to people and given out copies over and over and over again. But the Sharp experience, if I can play silly word games, was probably pretty formative for you in this
Yeah.
journey. Tell us about that, some of the things you learned when you really made the commitment to do that massive endeavor, and some of the good and bad things that you experienced with it.
Well, a couple of things. There were three levels of realization when you undergo organizational when you take an effort to try to make an organization healthier, better, and for people providing care, people receiving care. I and it was the impact of our efforts that really was kind of the source and rationale for pivoting my life. First of all, the Sharp experience was in the results that we were able to create with that at Sharp Healthcare was the work of many, many, many people.
Sure.
There were huge, amazing groups of committed leaders and frontline care team members that were committed to becoming better for patients and better for each other, better as leaders that drove the results that we were able to create together. But there were three things that I saw that prompted me to say, helping people become their best is a worthy journey. And the first was with myself. And I was, when I was selected to become the sort of the physician medical director for the Sharp experience, I was not particularly skilled in the things that I later learned about, meaning how do we really truly partner with patients? So we know well beyond their registry of symptoms and their underlying diagnosis and evidence-based treatment plans. but who they are, what matters to them, the lives that they lead, what their hopes and dreams and ambitions are, what they want and what they don't want, and what their responsibility is in advancing their wellness. All of those can manifest by interfacing and build a relationship with them. I didn't know how to do any of that stuff, and I didn't even know that I didn't know how to do it. I
It's not what
just
we're trained to do, right?
Right.
That's not part of our.
I can, gather a group of symptoms, create a differential, test against it, get to the root cause, issue a treatment plan, and next. I mean, that's what we're afraid to do. Uh, and so as I learned what I later taught about how to deeply connect with patients, I found a great restoration in the joy of medicine. And I got to admit that in advance of me forging deep relationships with patients and colleagues and teammates, and as a leader of the team, when I began to do those things that I later learned, before doing that, I found medicine exhausting. And it was before burnout was really well characterized and well articulated, and there was a sense that this is a significant issue of healthcare. I was really challenged with, I don't know if I can keep doing this. But when I learned the skills of deep patient connectivity, and the oxytocin and serotonin, dopamine pulsing that would come from that impact, I found that I was looking forward to medicine again. I found joy in medicine and effectiveness in medicine. So that was the first realization that becoming better on things that we didn't learn renders improved outcomes for our patients, certainly, but most importantly, to finding joy for ourselves. So that was the first realization, that it made a transformative impact. And then what I also noticed with my colleagues is that when we started coaching, training, and developing clinicians to better connect with patients and to more effectively lead their teams in the clinical microsystem setting, they found similar experiences, meaning, man, our team is working really well together. People are, bringing forward ideas. They're actively contributing. They feel recognized and appreciated. They're challenged to bring their best, and we're all contributing to a shared purpose and a mission. And a physician can help orchestrate that by leading their team effectively, as you have written about and been an advocate and champion for decades now in your brilliant book, All Physicians Lead. On And also the skills of becoming a really amazing teammate for our physician colleagues, our APP colleagues, and our staff members and our nursing. When we're better in that interaction, our sense of joy, purpose, in the clinical experience is different. So I was observing with my colleagues that they were finding joy and contentment and effectiveness through the process of developing skills to connect with patients, to collaborate with each other, and to lead their teams. And the last thing that I observed was what was happening organizationally, that the application of a human development strategy was driving big metric improvements in patient experience, team engagement, turnover, finance and quality, and harm events, all the different domains that are a dashboard of better healthcare, all seem to be moving. And so, as I saw the impact of skill development driving a personal transformation in my life by learning how to deeply connect with patients and to lead my teams and to become a better teammate, I learned and applied those things and made my life better. And I saw similar patterns with my colleagues, and I said, gosh, there's so many things that are important to being a really contributory and contented clinician. Wouldn't it make sense that we learn and apply those skills of patient connectivity, team collaboration, and leadership, because it's deeply enriching for the clinician? And lastly, you know, we're highly accountable as healthcare systems to deliver on outcomes. Um, Gosh, it makes sense to develop our people to raise the capacity to deliver on those outcomes with their behaviors and how they show up, particularly since those behaviors and how they show up are deeply enriching for them. So those observations said this is a life worth pursuing, and and in part, to be able to dedicate my life to help advancing the skills of care team members to be their best. And so that was the underlying observations. That was the rationale for the pivot. But I had a super hard time leaving the full-time camera. Super hard.
Like you said, it's a huge chunk of your identity,
Oh
right?
my gosh.
Not
Yeah.
just external
Oh my
identity,
God.
but your own internal sense of self.
Yes. 100%.
At some point, we all need to hang up the stethoscope, but I'm not ready yet either. So, um, you brought up an incredibly good point. You've written about it. You've just described it wonderfully. That the changes that can occur in industry, what they call at the point of production, in our business, the environment of care, really influenced by those, if you will, frontline clinicians, doctors, nurses, everybody. But at APL, we focus on physicians because sometimes I bring up hard truths, and I can do that because I'm a doctor and I won't get poked at. So conversely, our current connotation of physician leader is someone who, like you and me, has risen to some position in the organizational structure and has a business card and probably an office with your name on it. Now you're a physician leader. And we put a lot of resources into training physicians at that level.
Mm-hmm.
And there are tons of books and courses and programs and advanced degrees that you can get to become a leader. When you look at empirically trying to prove CEO characteristics and their impact on organizational outcomes, it's virtually impossible because there's so many variables in between. However, in all industries, including healthcare, as you again have just described beautifully, the impact of the frontline managers, doctors in this case, as we talk about that, is very easily demonstrated to improve, as you just said, retention, error rates, environment of care, patient experience, and ultimately, although this one's harder to prove empirically, patient outcomes. So when we think about it that way, where are you able to focus? How are you able to convince organizations to put those resources into, your brand new doctors or the doctors that are 100% clinical, and maybe, either add to or pull from the resources that you're putting toward those 10, 15, 20-year doctors, saying, we're going to have a bigger impact on all those metrics that you talked about if we focus on the folks that are doing the work.
Leon, I would even go so far. First of all, I'm fully tracking, supporting, and advocating for frontline physicians leading at the clinical microsystem level to drive change.
Yeah.
I would even contend, in my observations, that an organization's capability of going through transformative change is a fool's errand in the absence of physicians rendering their local influence to drive human behavioral change. Because let's just give you two extreme examples.
Yep.
Let's just say the positions that you have within a system are disengaged, I have no advocacy or loyalty to what the organization is trying to become. They have no awareness of what the future ambitions and future state intentions are of the organization. They're unwilling to deploy any discretionary effort to help those goals be achieved. And the signals that they send to their team are, leaders are out to get us. They don't care about us. And we're in about survival mode, and to hell with them. And we're just going to do our work here and hopefully stay below the radar.
Yeah. Antagonistic.
And
right.
antagonistic.
We're on a hamster wheel, and all they care about is revenue. Right.
Right. And you inoculate the organization with that persona. Okay. And the clinical microsystem that receives signals and cues and modeling of that kind of physician. And I'm not criticizing that physician. I'm just describing what is a very real circumstance in American healthcare right now. That those teams' ability to take action to create transformative improvement approaches zero. And so that is the physician not leveraging their influence to impact the thoughts and actions of others to achieve results. Who says that?
It's vaguely familiar. There's a book I saw on my shelf. Some guy named
Right.
Wars wrote that.
Right. So that's one end of the spectrum. Okay. Let's just theoretically take another end of the spectrum. The physician that is willing to deploy discretionary effort to help the organization achieve its goals, feels deeply connected to what the organization is trying to become for patients from a quality standpoint, and the culture of collaboration and care as a team, and kindness and compassion for every patient every time. And they're deeply connected and strong advocates for organizational intentions. And they're willing to leverage their voice, their modeling, and leadership to the people that they touch locally to raise the bar to execute against that future state. Kindness and compassion for every patient, every time, evidence-based care, and all we do to close care gaps, and collaboration and partnership with each other to deliver care amazingly as a team. The how the clinician shows up, and those two physician personas will predict the capacity of change. So that's observationally, and I think there's very, very good data to show that when physicians engage, participate, and leverage local influence to drive change, they drive change. And when physicians are disconnected, disengaged, in despair, overwhelmed, exhausted, then the team will follow those cues and will perform at a different level. So the question is, and everybody would advocate, yes, we want the engaged physician who's leveraging their influence to make their team better. Everybody wants that, right? The question is, what is it that creates those highly engaged clinicians versus the deeply disengaged clinicians? And how it is that we lead our clinicians, and how we develop our clinicians are the principal determinants of how clinicians migrate to the highly engaged versus the deeply disengaged. Meaning, when clinicians say, "I have a voice here, I am appreciated here, my administrative burden is decreased here. We are going to goals that deeply sync with my identity as a healer, and I can advocate for what we're trying to become, our future state goals. Hell yes, that's what I want to be a part of. I'm gonna not only do it myself, I'm gonna advocate and champion for it, and I'm gonna defend it actually. And so when we lead our physicians in a way, it builds willingness and receptiveness to participate and contribute to the journey. And we develop our clinicians with the skills and actions to lead their teams locally with growth mindset, team intelligence, team enablement, gratitude, leader as coach, all of those things. Those are specific skills. And if those clinicians have those skills, and they're led in a way that builds willingness and receptiveness to participate, that's a very, very powerful cultural driver to raise the capacity of organizations to achieve their goals. And in the absence of it, you can create accountabilities and incentives and talk all you want, but until at the motor end plate of healthcare, clinicians are advocating for our future, they're doing it themselves, they're leveraging their influence locally, it's very hard to get the organizational momentum to achieve results. And essentially it comes down to physicians leading their teams.
Yep. Yeah, yeah. That, those frontline folks have so much more influence on the day-to-day operations of not only those team members, but every patient, excuse me, that cycles through your organization, right? Uh, every single one is impacted by that particular thing. One of the key concepts that I know you started out with is the idea of the experience and, leveraging some prior work that was done where we talk about the levels of things that people can acquire, commodities being sort of the lowest, and that's somebody drops a 50-pound bag of coffee beans in your driveway. It's a burlap sack, and you have to, bring it in, can it, grind it, and do everything to it. Goods, where you go to the Safeway and buy a 1-pound bag that is pre-ground the way you like it, bring it home, you have to make it. The increase in cost from commodities to goods is pretty substantial per pound. Services, where you walk into the 7-Eleven and it's brewed for you. Again, big leap in the cost per pound. And then experiences, and you referenced Starbucks, and it's a great example for all of us to say that that is different. It feels different. You bond to it differently. And the cool thing about that is, in terms of the value proposition, is that the increased cost to go from services to experience isn't that great, but what you can charge for that difference between services and experience is extraordinary. So your return on investment is huge. And that's what, you experienced. You grew with the team that you talked about at Sharp for those patients and team members. Are you able to replicate that? And I know that's what you're doing now. We dive into that. How do you get organizations to buy in, and what's the level of commitment that you're seeing?
Yeah, there's no question that the financial or the financial state of healthcare seems to be under continuous duress, and particularly with the passage of the current legislation, there is going to be additional compression and scrutiny on spend. And, and any intervention that is done has to have definitive solid line to return on investment. And so the question is, what sense can we make of making an investment to develop our people to create an outcome? And here's I'll just reference a little bit of observation, some data, and my personal opinion regarding the investment of people and their capacity to execute the results of the organization. If you were, we did some analysis on if we were to develop care team members to interact with patients in a way that was different. So the patients who receive care from this developed team would say things like, everybody I know and care about and love has to come here for their care. I'm a champion and advocate and believer. And when open enrollment comes, there's no way I'm going anywhere else for my care. That is organizations that have delivered on the experience will have patients who will say that. They will have highly loyal patients. Okay. So if we know exactly what actions we take as a care team member for patients to feel that. Patients have to feel cared about. They have to feel heard. They have to feel confident in the team's abilities, and they have to be included in care. So in each of those 4 domains have specific actions that can allow those things to manifest. So let's say theoretically, we used human development to create consistent actions between care team members and patients so the patients rendered loyalty. What we found in our analysis, and this is more in a capitated environment. These are capitated estimations, but the commercial insurance has similar calculations that we estimated based upon our models that the retention of a single patient of a single clinician over the course of a year would render about a 20 to 25 to 1 ROI in terms of the cost of investment of the development of skills to render that loyalty. What we also know is that, according to AMGA data, that the out-of-network leakage meaning patients deciding to go out of network, at the top line revenue loss on a per physician, employed physician basis is about $700,000 per year per physician. And about 40% of that out of network leakage is by virtue of entire indifference by the patient to the care team system and the care provider.
Wow. Yeah.
So,
That makes sense though, right? I mean,
right.
it's good data and it's intuitive.
Right. So when we talk about how do we how do we create consistent experience between care team member and patient that is reliable and at every touch point of care so patients stay, the ROI on that notion is very, very, very powerful. And I got to tell you, at Sharp Healthcare, we had not only patient experience and team engagement and talent retention transformation, we had a financial transformation. And it was by virtue of patient loyalty. We were able to grow market share for 10 consecutive years in a very competitive region. So the investment in skills to connect with patients, I think, has compelling ROI. And I would also contend, per a conversation about developing leadership skills, not only formal leaders, but also, as we would, you and I's, our passion in life mission is to develop all clinicians as local clinical system team leaders. That when we develop leaders to engage their people, if you look at across all industries, looking at big metadata sets, that the ability to retain clinical talent, engage clinical talent is 10, 15, 20x better in those organizations that develop their leaders to better engage their people. I mean, the data is ridiculous. So if we were to say, gosh, we're going to develop all of our leaders, manager and above, on evidence-based leadership skills to retain our people, and you're able to retain in a 500 physician group, one clinician over the course of a year as a result of broad leadership development efforts, and that's a conservative estimate.
Right.
That pays for all of your development,
The entire program.
organization for about 5 years.
Yeah.
So doing things that retain and engage our people and doing actions to develop the skills to keep and retain our patients, for me, is in the no-brainer category. And, to say, oh, we got to cut $110,000 to develop our people. Not only do, particularly younger, people that are coming into an organization, they want to ascend. They want to be grown, developed, and advance. And if you don't offer that because you've cut it, not only are they not going to be doing the effective behaviors to retain patients, that retain people, but they're going to bail on the organization because they don't see a future here. So despite all the financial headwinds, I would consider the development of people to be an investment that renders powerful ROI. But at the same time, if you're going to develop a human development strategy, you've got to map it to engagement, retention, patient experience, and out-of-network care. So we're driving tangible, quantitative outcomes as a result of the investment, because I think that's a circumstance in this tight financial conditions that we're all in right now.
Yeah, and these are all so tightly bound. It's this virtuous spiral where you get folks that are this engaged, then that metastasizes to everybody else on the team. They become more engaged. The patients are more engaged. Everybody's happier.
Yeah, it's a flywheel.
And it just keeps advancing, even if it was a neutral cost revenue number, but then that's going to drive all the things that drive revenue, as you said, market share,
right? Oh my God.
complication rates, readmission rates, all these things that matter on your financial bottom line are impacted by the performance, the engagement, the error rates, the retention. Retention is such a huge, we measure it, but we really don't calculate the true cost every time we lose a team member.
Oh, yeah.
on any spreadsheets that I've seen, on any income statements that I've seen. If anything, it it looks a little positive because you're not paying salary and benefits for that gap. But we know there's good data out there that shows how much, not just loss of a physician, but loss of a nurse, a technician from a team is a huge cost. Just moving that needle a little bit by making the one of the key drivers of the environment of care, physicians, their attitudes,
Yeah.
a little bit better.
Yeah, and then you've got to re-onboard them. You've got to, acclimate them to your culture. So when there's turnover of people, and again, the engagement equation, meaning, we refer to as engagement as I'm going to stay here. I would recommend this place to colleagues. I will deploy my discretionary effort to help this organization succeed. I will use my voice and my local influence to help the organization become better. I'm gonna advocate and champion for our future state. And this place where I am is everything what I hoped my professional life to be.
Yeah.
That's engagement, right? And about 70 to 80% of the entire engagement equation is how their frontline leader is leading them. And the variant regarding frontline leader skill and action is wild. Some are people pleasers, some have no candor, some are command and control, some are micromanagers, some don't communicate effectively, some belittle and intimidate, don't create psychological safety, some don't
Yeah.
tap people for ideas, some never develop and there's 12 known evidence-based leadership skills that are known to engage people, and that engagement of people is a dependency for organizational culture and the capability of getting results. And the idea of we're not going to develop our leaders to engage our people is, you might as well say we're happy with how we are. Our ambitions to achieve our organizational future state goals, we hope it happens, but we have no deliberate pathway
Yeah.
outside of hope that it's going to happen. And again, human development and learning organizations and continuous mastery and improvement on skills and behaviors and mindsets has been proven again and again and again to be an incredible catalyst to achieving results. And when they're disengaged, they leave.
Yeah.
And as you said, when they leave, it gets costly and clunky and hard to really focus on building a culture and identity of what it means to be us when people are continuously bailing or emotionally disconnecting
Yeah.
and just collected a paycheck.
Yeah, and all our teammates are very mobile in healthcare.
Oh my,
You can get a job, particularly in a packed market where, you and I work. Um, you, you can find a job tomorrow, very, very, very easily.
yeah, yeah,
You mentioned earlier the unknown unknowns, the things you don't know. And when I think about leadership training, we don't have sort of a baseline knowledge of even what skill sets we necessarily need. I go back and forth with folks all the time when we're talking about our leaders made or born, and people are like, "Oh no, they're definitely born leaders." Well, the funny thing about that is you don't necessarily look at a 6-month-old and go, "Oh, there's a born leader right there," right? I mean, by the time you categorize someone as a quote born leader, they're at least in high school or college or in a job, and you see people following them because they seem to be a born leader, but they've had enormous experiences up to that point in life, whether it's community, church, parents, sports teams, coaches that have created this person who looks like a born leader because they're relatively young and people follow them.
yeah,
But as you just said, there is the bell curve for leadership skills and styles is, wider than my arms. And we see all kinds of stereotypes that stereotypes are there for a reason, of doctors behaving in ways that we go, well, is that the best way to lead in that environment? And if you're not self-aware, if you don't self-manage, step one and step two, and you don't recognize that, I'm a neurosurgeon, right? So my default style is pace setting. That's just, and that's great at 10 o'clock at night when a kid's been hit by a car and we're in the OR and there's blood everywhere and people just need to move, but doesn't work nearly as well the next day in clinic and doesn't work at all the next day in the executive suite. But if you're not exposed to that, if you don't know that there are different styles, if you don't have some language to put to it, if you're not coached every now and then saying, that interaction that you had with that patient, family, nurse, administrator, whatever, how do you think that went? Did you feel uncomfortable? Is there any way it could have gone better? Are there different things? That kind of coaching is something, I hope we can get to culturally in 20 or 30 years in medicine, that we're not just coaching people on their cognitive skills or their technical expertise, but also their interpersonal skills, leadership skills in that healthcare environment. What does that sound like to you?
Well, I would quote somebody that I know, you, where, and
Flattered.
I reference all positions lead almost every single day because
Wow.
it's so deeply connected with what I've observed in terms of physicians leveraging local influence to mobilize their team to take action to achieve a result.
Yeah.
And the result is not only we're turning red boxes green, but the result is people saying, I love coming to work and I love my crew. And I feel really valued and we're getting good stuff done. And we laugh together, we tease each other, we feel really safe and we support each other, we look out for each other. And this team is killer.
Yeah.
If clinicians show up as a really effective local leader, all of that is possible. And you said in your book, I our leadership skills as physicians are as important as our clinical skills.
Yeah.
And we pay almost no attention to it. And you brought up a couple of the key points. I think part of the process is the realization and the declaration and the reflection that I am a leader and how I show up has profound impact on how my team goes. And that self, that self-realization and declaration is an important part. And the next question is, what do I do to effectively lead my team? And you had mentioned one of the key skills, and we always begin the process of leadership development with leading self. Uh, That's leading self is the formulation of your identity of what does it mean to be me? What do I stand for? What is my do this and don't do this compass that will guide everything I do, my value system, my registry of identity? Because once we formulate that, if they say I'm going to be a collaborator, I'm going to be grateful for the people that I work with. If there's a challenge, I'm going to speak up. When I speak up, I'm going to do so honestly and respectfully, and I'm going to model the behaviors of what I want from other people, and or whatever that identity is. People have to go through and say, what does it mean to be me? And then to have an immense awareness of my impact on other people, and to realize and to utilize that feedback from other people to formulate and adjust and grow as a leader in the spirit of self-awareness. So, I think the process is not only a realization that we have tremendous capacity and influence to lead. All physicians lead. And the second is, what actions do I take to adaptively lead my team? And that process there of what actions do I take is where I believe, and I know we've had conversations about this, the application of leadership development for all clinicians who lead their clinical microsystems And there's not yet organizations that are doing this well. I would say it's every chief medical officer that I speak to and I say, what about the idea of certifying every single clinician on how to effectively lead their clinical microsystem using basic evidence-based leadership skills? What do you think about that idea? I've yet to meet a CMO who said anything but yes, 100%. That's what we should be doing. Which is the exciting conversation with you because you're the tip of the spear in regards of advocating for all physicians lead. But the hope and the dream is to develop a skill development mechanism so all physicians can learn how to lead. And the byproduct of effective local physician leadership is all the downstream impact of engagement, retention, and culture that can happen when we're leading well.
And we get away with it in medicine for a couple of reasons. I mean, physicians are, I'm not, patting ourselves on the back here, but, smart, dedicated, hardworking, care about patients. And because of all that, there's a wide range of behaviors that are acceptable. And we have moved that benchmark in, my decades of experience. There are things that you could have done 30 years ago that you're certainly not going to get away with today. But that's just really the whack-a-mole. If you're really bad, we're going to call you into the CMO's office and you'll get a performance improvement plan and you can't act like that again, rather than saying, well, we want to take everybody and move them, not just the 2 standard deviations out actors that are acting badly. But our system has sort of developed culturally to also be fairly forgiving. Surgeons having a temper tantrum in the OR and everybody just kind of gets quiet and they're like, well, there's a lot of stress, which is true. And they're under a lot of pressure, which is true. And there's a tight timeline, which is true. All these things allow enabling of less than optimal behavior. And the reason I think about that concept is, what is the burning platform or the, slightly warm to touch platform? When people say, hey, we're fine. Our doctors lead quite well. Thank you very much. We don't need to invest heavily in training our frontline leaders. We're investing in our department heads and directors and CMO later on down the line. How do we change that conversation? A lot of what you've already talked about, with data that says, no. A smaller but more widely distributed investment, or maybe the same investment but spread out over a lot more people, will actually generate better results than you sending Leon to get an MBA.
Right. Well, I think those are critical questions. And I would offer up the observation in the literature that shows that it is frontline leadership that drives outcomes. And it's leaders who are proximal to the front line. And, directors and executives, as you referenced, there's just very little correlation between the attributes of the executive team and the outcomes of the organization. And if we, as decision makers and those that decide how will we deploy our resources to best improve our organization, investing in the frontline leadership capabilities, which include managers and clinicians,
Right.
I believe, and the literature supports, to have the most profound impact on the things that we care about, meaning engagement. Meaning we're measuring engagement and there's clear trending that our people are feeling participatory, committed, and loyal to our organization. And certainly turnover is something that we believe that we can impact, and that has significant ROI. And I'm not seeing a lot of organizations in my 3, 5, 7, sometimes 10 conversations in a day where leaders are saying, I'm really excited about where our culture's heading right now. Really pleased with how people are showing up, how people feel about working here, their hope, belief, and optimism, their loyalty, their discretionary effort, and their commitment. There's a lot of worry in regards to how the care team members collectively, the clinical body and the support body are doing right now. And I think there's no question that how we are leading, and how we are leading locally is the biggest driver of engagement and culture. And then to expect engagement and cultural results to manifest without frontline leaders, including physicians, knowing what actions to take to engage their people, I think is a massive gap. And I got to tell you, at Sharp Healthcare, we did frontline leader development.
Yeah.
We had 1,500, 2,000 people in a room. It was old school, meaning it was classroom style because we
Yeah.
didn't have the tools
Back
we
in the
have.
day. Yeah.
But it was a massive investment. I asked our CEO, Mike Murphy, once. I said, "What does all this cost?" And he didn't tell me, but it was definitely in the seven figures. And it was absolutely 100% the development of our people that transform our organization financially, culturally, and made us the emerging leader in a very, very competitive marketplace, was by investing in the capabilities of our people to achieve outcomes.
Yeah. Well, it definitely showed. I mean, absolutely remarkable improvement in so many metrics, critical metrics. So congratulations to you and the team for that. You talk a lot. You've mentioned it a couple of times. Expand upon it for folks who are saying, okay, clinicians, be their best. What does that look like if I were to walk in and see my doctor, or if my colleagues and they were being their best in clinic every day? What's that look like? What's it feel like?
Yeah, it's interesting. We often look at what makes for an amazing contributory clinician. And I think there's a number of different domains, some of which are well developed and well trained and a part of our maturation as clinicians. And responsibility number one is the ability to diagnose and manage illness and advance wellness of patients. That is a critical skill set for which many clinicians are really, really good. Another key competency that makes for critical physicians is our ability to connect and activate and engage patients in care. Uh, just financially, it's 10 times more expensive to go get a new patient than it is to keep the patient you currently have. And the patient's willingness to participate in a treatment plan, if they don't trust a clinician, is radically different than a really healthy bond. So there's clinical implications. So the skill of I'm really good at rendering loyalty and engagement and participation of patients, that's a critical skill. Equally important is I'm going to be a great colleague, meaning I'm going to send good referrals. I'm going to be there for my colleagues and help and support and provide care together with my physician colleagues. I'm going to position my colleagues well as I send and receive referrals. A physician who's amazing with patients and really good clinically, but not a good colleague, is a cultural wrecking ball. So you got to learn the skills of being a great colleague. And then, as we've spoken about, you got to learn how to lead your clinical microsystem. What are the actions that I take that make me an effective leader, so we can mobilize the effort of our people to bring their best, to actively contribute and to achieve goals in the care that we provide. So a local team leader is critically important, and other skills are critical efficiency. So if you're amazing with patients, you're an amazing colleague, you're clinically really strong, you're a good team leader, but you see 4 patients per half day, well, that doesn't really work. So you got to be clinically efficient as well. And we also have to be steward of resources, meaning if you're really clinically efficient, you're amazing with patients, you're an amazing team leader, you're clinically super strong, but you order 6x more complex imaging than anybody else, making you expensive. Well, in San Diego, you get tiered at a network. So all of these things make for really great clinicians. We're steward of resources. We adhere to evidence, and we're really good diagnosticians. We're amazing with patients. We're amazing with our colleagues. We lead our teams. The mass majority of those things we never really learned on how to do. So, and I would contend and ask you, which of these skills do we want to drop? What do we want our physicians not to do? We're going to say, well, none of those. All of those are great.
Yeah, that
So
one's not important.
we're great. So getting those things to manifest requires an organization to continuously develop their people to achieve results. And that's the power of a human development strategy, to allow clinicians and care team members to learn how to become a great colleague, to learn how to deploy safety behaviors, right? Which is a whole other set of opportunity to learn and grow and apply skills.
That's right.
To learn how to deeply connect with patients. And I've learned, if nothing else, that what clinicians in particular think they do and what we actually do is a chasm. And so when clinicians say, we ask clinicians, do patients trust you? There's not a single clinician that will say no. But if you look at the data and you look at the experience of patients and decisions that patients make, including things like filling or not filling a prescription, there's a huge chasm. But the good news is we know exactly how to build patient trust in that one channel of competency. So wouldn't it make sense to build the skills of patient connectivity to render trust so patients stay in network, participate in care for themselves, and advocate for us in the community? And then for us to say, oh, we're not going to develop our clinicians because those things don't matter very much. I mean, they that way, but that's essentially the consequence.
Just sounds silly on the face, right?
Right.
So, Steve Beeson, clinician, leader, author, practicing excellence, engaging physicians, continuing great work. Last thought, wrap it up. What would you say to physicians and leadership?
I would say we get to decide who we're going to be in this life. We have full dominion over the light that we create, the impact that we create. And despite all of the external locus circumstances and sometimes chaos, when we show up at work, in the exam room, with our teams, we get to choose. And there's a lot of power in that.
Well, thank you again, and look forward to more conversations for sure.
You bet, Leon. We're gonna do. I'm gonna keep tapping you, and
I can't wait
to leverage your work and your ethic and your beliefs to try to make healthcare better through human development. So,
looking forward to it. All right, best to you.
Okay, all right, take care.
This has been All Physicians Lead. We can all be better leaders, and our teammates and patients will be the beneficiaries. Go to allphysicianslead.com to unlock your potential, sharpen your impact, and elevate your journey. All Physicians Lead with Dr. Leon Morse is a production of Forbes Books.